Welcome to this video presentation of NATO land logistics. After this presentation, you should be able to recall the levels of logistic support and the Nations Logistic Responsibilities, summarize the characteristics of land logistics, explain the flow of supply from the theater logistic base and the national support element, explain the stockpiling for land forces. Strategic level logistics deal with the force generation, national acquisition, force projection, strategic mobility, and the strategic concentration of logistic assets in an operation. Operational level logistics encompasses the support of the some process, reception, staging, and onward movement of the unit and personnel, infrastructure development, distribution, and the management of contracting, provision of supplies and services, and movement control within the joint operation area. Tactical level logistics provides units with the right support at the right time and in the right place. At this level, supply, transportation, maintenance, medical and health services support, administrative and field services are critical to soldiers to accomplish their specific missions. The reception, staging and onward movement process will be described in a later presentation. Support of contributed forces. Nations have the ultimate responsibility for equipping their forces and ensuring, individually or by cooperative arrangements, the provision of required logistic resources to support their forces assigned to NATO during peace, crisis, and conflict. If nations elect to support forces through a national support system, it remains vital that they interface with the appropriate NATO logistic coordination body. Contribution of resources. Participating nations are responsible for providing all the personnel and equipment required to conduct an operation, except when NATO agrees to provide such resources. These resources are dedicated either through the planned allocation of forces through the force planning process or through requirement identified in the contingency operational planning process. The type and scale of logistic forces will decisively affect the actual logistic concept of operation for a NATO operation, and the transfer of authority limitations imposed on participating forces. Planning. Nations are strongly encouraged to develop and agree to generic pre-arrangements for multinational logistic support. They should inform NATO wherever they can to provide contribution to multinational or integrated logistic units under the force generation process. Host nation support. The host nation may provide a range of support services. This will be coordinated by NATO on behalf of all participating nations. The host nation support and other logistic providers or organizations will be described in a later presentations. National support elements are organized and located as dictated by their national authorities for the provision of national logistic support coordinated with a joint task force in the joint operation area. The national support elements will be described in a later presentation. The nature of current and future land operations reflects the diversities and complexities of the environment. The number and varieties of participants, competence, non-competence, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, observers, the media, and other interested parties, fractions, and agencies with the potential for errors, confusion, and friction will be greater in land operations than in other environments. This complexity requires an approach that emphasizes decentralized command, freedom of action, tempo, and initiative in order to contend with the multitude of activities and rapidly changing situations. Land forces roles normally entail the holding of terrain, destroying enemy forces, occupying territory, and regaining lost territory. Land forces require substantial logistic supply, which normally requires sea lift, airlift, and ground transportation. Logistics enables land force operations by providing it with the tool and resources to support operations across a spectrum of conflict. Well-planned and coordinated logistics provides the land forces with the ability to conduct operations well within the depth of the joint operations area. Support of the deployment of land forces requires an understanding that all logistics are part of a multinational community, as the land forces are composed of several nations, and the purpose is to support comprehensive operations. Multinational logistics support for modern land forces require both flexibility and mobility. Land components support concept is designed to ensure the necessary support for both national and multinational forces. Logistics will be based on a national regulations, and elements of support will be agreed between the various contribution nations, either bilaterally or multinationally. Land operations are basically dependent on external support to move the force to a combat zone. Land forces will not normally be able to move themselves from a home base to one area of operation. They will be completely dependent on land, sea, or air-based lifting capacities. There may also be vehicles on the roads, trains. There may be larger transport vessels at sea or planes. Mobility and the ability to move oneself over greater distances within an area of operation is also a challenge. Therefore, the reception, staging, and onward movement process is important. In relation to logistics and volume, Class 1, 3, and 5 will demand extensive use of transportation resources to maintain the flow of logistic supplies going forward in a joint operation area. The lines of supply for land operations are both complex and comprehensive. The land component is the component that is the most dependent on a joint logistic support group structure. A logistic convoy can be defined as moving logistic supplies by road and is normally a logistic task. But when a logistic convoy is supported by a force protection unit, it becomes an operational task that is planned and executed by the land component. Joint Logistic Support Group is responsible for the third line storage of supplies at the theater logistic base. Normally 15 days of supplies of Class 1, 3, and 4. Theater logistic base uses push system down to the brigade support areas. The theater logistic base also supports Special Operation Component Command through Land Component Command's brigade support areas, mostly with the pull system. The brigade support area will normally use push system to resupply their land forces. National Support Elements is responsible for the third line storage of Class 2, 4, and 5. National Support Elements and Joint Logistic Support Group coordinates between each other the division of the responsibility for Class 4. National Support Element uses pull system on Class 2, 4, and 5 through the theater logistic base down to brigade support area. The brigade support area will normally use push system to resupply their own forces. Stockpiling of logistics within the lines of supply chain is critical for land forces. The limited organic resources for handling and transportation of logistics at both first and the second line prevents the possibilities to over-stockpiling close to the front line. We need to ensure that the stockpiling at the first and second line always are filled up to its maximum. If overstocking at the second line, the Joint Logistic Support Group needs to allocate own transportation assets to be ready to move these logistic supplies according to the movement of the land forces. The daily use of supplies by each soldier, vehicle, weapon system are not a part of the stockpiling. We have in this presentation introduced you to the land logistics. Key takeaway: land operations has the largest footprint of logistic support resources. Land forces require a continuously flow of supplies. Land logistics is dependent upon a joint logistic support structure. Thank you for following this presentation.